Welcome to tonight's sleep story. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. The wind was gentle that evening, the kind of breeze that fluttered the curtains and carried the scent of blooming jasmine through the windows. A soft murmur of the outside world, calm and peaceful, filled the quiet room. Inside, the air smelled of dust, age, and something else, an unspoken sense of expectation, lingering as though the house itself was waiting for something. The room was modest, the walls lined with old books and simple furniture. But it wasn't the furniture that had drawn attention, nor the bookshelves filled with forgotten stories. No, it was something much more peculiar, a box sitting in the middle of the room on a wooden pedestal. It was plain, yet somehow mesmerizing. A small wooden box, nothing extraordinary, except for the curious engraving on its surface. Intricate swirls that seemed to dance as the light shifted Dot as the man, the owner of this quiet, solitary space looked at the box. Something stirred. Within him, a pull he could not fully explain. He had never seen it before, and yet it felt as if it had always been there, waiting for him, biding its time. He had not ordered it, nor had he received any letter or parcel. It had simply arrived. He cautiously moved towards the box, his fingers tingling as if drawn by an invisible force. Curiosity gripped him. What was it about this seemingly simple box that felt so important? What secrets do you hold? He whispered, his voice almost lost in the stillness. The words were meant for himself, but they felt oddly compelling, as though the box had already begun speaking to him without uttering a single word. The air grew thicker as he slowly knelt beside the box. He reached for it with hesitant hands, the cold wood sending a shiver up his spine. There was an unfamiliar smoothness to it, as if it had been shaped by hands far more delicate than his own. He lifted it, and the weight felt light, too light. For something that seemed so serious, Dot suddenly, a soft whispering filled the air around him, quiet at first, like a distant murmur, but it grew louder, clearer. His heartbeat quickened as the voice seemed to speak directly into his mind. Open it, the voice seemed to say. Unlock the path before you. His breath caught in his throat. The air around him thickened, charged with an energy he had never felt before. The box seemed to hum with life, as though it were waiting, urging him to act. But what was he opening? What was he letting in? His hands trembled as he turned the box over, searching for any hint, any clue, any sign of what it might contain. For a moment, he hesitated. Was it a dream? A trick of his mind? Or was it something more? Was this the beginning of something he could not yet understand? The whispering continued, but this time there was no fear. There was only a quiet, irresistible pull. The decision was no longer his. It had been made for him. The box had chosen him, and now he had to listen. He carefully lifted the lid. The moment he opened it, a light so bright and warm flooded the room. It wasn't harsh like the glare of a spotlight, but gentle and soothing. It surrounded him, pulling him in. His eyes widened. The light was almost overwhelming, but there was something comforting about it too. He felt as if he had stepped into something greater than himself, something eternal and vast. The voice, now clearer, spoke again, its tone soft but commanding. You found the key. Now you will follow. And in that moment, he understood. The box was not just an object. It was a doorway, a gateway to something beyond the ordinary, beyond the limits of his understanding. The journey had begun. The light from the box still lingered in the room, casting soft shadows that danced across the walls like ghosts of the past. The air, once still and calm, now felt alive, as though the very space around him had come to life in response to the box's mysterious presence. The whispering voice from before was no longer just a faint murmur. It had grown clearer, filling the air with its gentle, almost hypnotic tone. Follow the path, the voice continued, its cadence slow and deliberate, as if guiding him down an unknown road. The road less traveled, where your true self awaits. With a hesitant breath, the man closed the box, feeling a sense of finality as he set it back down on the pedestal. He no longer felt the need to explore its physical contents. The true power of the box lay not in its exterior, but in the strange world it had opened in his mind and heart. He felt a pull, a quiet compulsion to follow the voice, to listen to its instructions and see where they would lead him. He walked to the door, his movements slow, deliberate, as if every step carried more weight than the last. The house, once familiar, now felt foreign, as though he were stepping into a new reality. The hallway stretched before him, a winding path that seemed to echo with whispers, guiding him further into the unknown dot. As he moved down the hall, he passed the familiar paintings and old furniture. The silence in the house was different now, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The dim light from the hallway lamps flickered like candles, casting an ethereal glow over everything in its path. He felt the weight of the moment, as though time itself had slowed. The voice seemed to grow stronger, yet it was not a demand. It was an invitation. He was being beckoned, drawn toward something he could not yet comprehend, but which felt undeniably right. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was destiny calling him forward, pulling him toward a future he hadn't imagined, but somehow knew he needed. He reached the door that led outside, where the cool night air greeted him. The crickets chirped softly in the distance, the scent of fresh grass filling his lungs. It was peaceful, almost serene, but the calmness didn't make him feel at ease. Instead, it was as if the world had taken a collective breath, waiting for him to make the next move. For a moment, he stood still, taking in the world around him. The house behind him, the night in front of him, the voice inside him. Everything was connected in a way that he had never before understood. He felt as though he were standing on the threshold of something vast and unknown. The voice whispered again, this time more urgent but still gentle. The path lies ahead. Follow it, and you will find what you seek. With a final deep breath, he stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the door and into the night. The path stretched before him, winding through the soft whispers of trees and the gentle rustle of leaves in the cool breeze. With every step, the familiar warmth of his home seemed to recede further into the distance. The air around him felt new charged, like the promise of a journey not yet begun, but inevitable. The weight of the night sky above him seemed both comforting and vast, like a blank canvas waiting to be filled with the strokes of his decisions. Asterisk, the world was still. Only the gentle sway of branches and the occasional call of an owl pierced the quiet. His footsteps, though light, seemed to reverberate in the hushed landscape. Each footfall felt like a step away from the safety he had known, each one taking him closer to a place where he would be forced to confront his deepest fears and desires. As he continued to walk, a strange calm settled over him. His thoughts, once tangled with anxiety and uncertainty, began to clear. It was as if the very act of stepping into this unknown world had freed him from the weight of past decisions. The scent of pine and earth filled the air, grounding him. In the present, while the coolness of the evening air brushed against his skin like a soft whisper, urging him to move forward, he wasn't alone in this journey, though. The voice from the box, still echoing softly in his mind, was a constant companion. At times, it felt like a guiding hand, leading him along the path. Other times, it seemed distant, like a memory or a dream just out of reach, but its presence was undeniable. It spoke of purpose, of a journey that he had been chosen to embark upon, but never clearly explained the why or how. "Trust the path," the voice whispered again, its tone more comforting now, "and you will find what is yours." The words, though cryptic, felt reassuring. As he walked deeper into the forest, the path ahead becoming increasingly unclear, there was a quiet determination that stirred within him. He realized that there was no turning back, not that he wanted to. The path had already chosen him, and now it was his choice to continue forward. The shadows deepened around him, casting everything in soft, silvery light, and the air began to grow cooler. He paused for a moment, his breath visible in the crisp night air. The world around him felt vast and full of possibilities, yet there was a subtle understanding forming within him. He wasn't sure what he would find at the end of this path, or where it would lead, but there was a strange comfort in not knowing. For once, he could simply build with the journey, with the night, and with the uncertainty of the future. After a while, the trail narrowed, and the trees grew taller and closer together. The air felt denser, as if the very world was enclosing around him, urging him to move with more intent. The rustling leaves beneath his feet grew louder, and he couldn't help but feel that the path itself was guiding him forward. It wasn't just the voice anymore. It was the landscape, the trees, the earth beneath him, all aligned in some deeper way. Pushing him towards something greater. He walked on, feeling the ground beneath him shift, the soft crunch of leaves beneath his boots grounding him in the present moment. His breath steadied, his heart no longer racing with uncertainty but beating in rhythm with the path itself. He was no longer running from something. He was running towards something undefined, something that called to him from deep within. And then ahead of him, through the trees, he saw it, a faint glow in the distance, like the flicker of a lantern, barely visible through the branches. It beckoned him, just as the box had. The light was faint, almost like a trick of the mind, but it felt more real than anything he had encountered in a long time. His heart quickened, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was out of anticipation of what lay ahead. Without another thought, he quickened his pace, the sense of urgency growing. The light before him seemed to pulse, faint and elusive, but there was no doubt in his mind that it was where he was meant to go. The path had led him here, and the path would not mislead him. The glow in the distance was no longer faint. It had grown brighter as he moved forward, almost drawing him in with a magnetic force he couldn't explain. The trees, which had seemed so dense and close-knit, now opened up before him, parting like a curtain to reveal a small clearing. At the center of the clearing stood a tall, ancient lantern, its soft, flickering light casting long shadows across the grass. The lantern was old, its metal frame tarnished by time, yet the light it emitted was strong and steady, unwavering in the stillness of the night. He stopped for a moment, standing at the edge of the clearing, gazing at the lantern. It seemed so out of place in the forest, an object so human in design, yet so otherworldly in this wild, untouched space. He could feel his heart racing again, but this time it was not out of fear. It was excitement, curiosity, the pull of something greater than himself. The voice, still echoing in his mind, seemed to grow clearer with every step he took. The light is the path. The lantern guides you forward, it whispered. The words were simple, but they held the weight of something deeper, something that stirred the very core of his being. The path was no longer just about moving forward. It was about understanding what lay ahead and what he was meant to discover in this strange, dreamlike journey. He stepped into the clearing, his boots soft against the ground, and approached the lantern. Its light bathed him in warmth, contrasting with the coolness of the night air. The flame inside danced, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on the ground. It felt as though the lantern was alive, as though it held a presence, a spirit that had been waiting for him. As he reached out to touch the lantern, a soft breeze blew through the clearing, rustling the leaves around him. For a moment, it felt as though the entire forest had come to life, as if the trees and the ground itself were watching him, waiting for his next move. He hesitated, his fingers mere inches from the lantern's metal frame. The voice spoke again, now more urgent, more insistent. The lantern is not just a guide, it is the key to your future. Without fully understanding why, he gripped the lantern and pulled it gently from its base. It was surprisingly light in his hands, as though it had been waiting to be lifted. The moment he held it, the light seemed to grow brighter, more vibrant, and the air around him felt electric, charged with the energy of something new. He felt a pulse deep within the lantern's glow. The voice, once soft and cryptic, now surged with clarity. The path ahead is one you must walk, but you're not alone. The light will guide you, but it is your heart that will lead you. As the voice faded, the air returned to its previous stillness. He stood there, holding the lantern, uncertain of what came next. The path was still before him, yet now it felt as if the world had shifted. The once quiet, mysterious night now felt filled with purpose. The lantern in his hands had unlocked something more than the journey ahead. It had unlocked something within him, something he could not yet name, but knew he would soon discover. He glanced behind him at the path he had walked, now distant and blurred in the shadows. The road ahead beckoned him, the lantern's warm light guiding the way forward. With a deep breath, he took his first step into the unknown, the lantern's light casting his shadow long on the earth. This was the beginning, he realized, not just of a journey through the forest, but of a deeper, more profound journey within himself. And as he walked, the light of the lantern seemed to grow brighter with every step, illuminating his path forward and filling him with a quiet confidence he hadn't known he had sought as the man walked deeper into the forest. The path before him seemed to open up in a way that was both natural and eerie. The air had grown thicker, filled with a quiet tension, as though the very world around him was holding its breath, waiting for his next step. With a lantern in his hand, its warm light illuminating the ground ahead, the trees around him seemed to whisper, their branches swaying gently, guiding him forward with an unspoken promise. The further he walked, the more the forest began to change. The trees, once familiar and ordinary, now seemed to stretch towards the sky in strange, unnatural angles. Their trunks twisted in intricate patterns, as though they too had been drawn to this path, responding to the pull of the lantern's light. The forest felt alive, as though it had been waiting for him. Just as the voice in the box had spoken, he stopped for a moment, the warmth of the lantern's light flickering gently in his hands. The voice from the box echoed once again in his mind, its tone soft but commanding. "Follow the light," it whispered. "Let it show you the way." The words were simple, but they filled him with a sense of clarity and understanding. The path ahead wasn't just a physical journey, it was a journey within. This light, this lantern, wasn't just leading him through the forest. It was guiding him through his own mind, his own heart, towards something greater than he could have imagined. With a deep breath, he took another step forward, his gaze fixed on the lantern's soft glow. The world around him seemed to fall away, the sounds of the forest fading into the background. All that mattered was the light and the feeling that it was calling him closer to something important, something that had been waiting for him all along. He felt a quiet calm wash over him, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid. The uncertainty that had once held him in its grip began to loosen, replaced by a sense of peace and acceptance. The lantern's light was more than just a guide, it was a symbol of his own inner light, of the part of him that had always known the way, even when he had doubted it. As he walked deeper into the heart of the forest, the landscape around him continued to shift. The air grew cooler, and the light from the lantern seemed to pulse softly, matching the rhythm of his heart. He felt a deep sense of connection to the world around him, as though every step he took brought him closer not just to the physical destination, but to his own true self. In the distance, he could see a faint shape emerging from the darkness, just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. It was hard to make out at first, but as he approached, it became clearer, a small stone altar bathed in the lantern's soft glow. The altar stood alone, untouched by time, as though it had always been there, waiting for him. The voice spoke again, this time with a sense of quiet urgency. "This is where your journey begins." Asterisk, he approached the altar slowly, his heart beating faster now with a mixture of excitement and reverence. He could feel the energy in the air, a tangible presence that surrounded him, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make his next move. As he reached out to place the lantern on the altar, the ground beneath him seemed to tremble. The air shifted, and for a moment, everything felt alive, the forest around him humming with energy. He carefully placed the lantern down, its light flickering brightly for a moment before settling into a soft, steady glow. The forest was still once more, and the quiet was deafening. For the first time since this journey began, he felt as if he had reached a moment of clarity, a moment of profound understanding. This was the beginning, the place where everything would change. The lantern was no longer just a guide, it had become a part of him, a symbol of the path he had chosen. As the light continued to glow softly on the altar, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, as though all the doubts and fears that had plagued him were finally being washed away. And in that moment, he understood. The light was not something he needed to follow. The light had always been within him, guiding him from the very beginning. All he had to do was trust it and trust himself. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it would be worth it. As the lantern settled gently on the stone altar, the air around the protagonist seemed to shift once again, this time with a subtle hum that vibrated through his very bones. The stillness of the forest, previously filled with the whispering of leaves, now felt as though it were holding its breath, waiting for something profound to unfold. The light from the lantern flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the ancient stones. In that quiet, sacred moment, it seemed as though time had stopped altogether. For a long while, the protagonist simply stood there, feeling the weight of the moment. His fingers still tingled from the touch of the lanterns. Cold metal, but the warmth of its glow had sunk deep into him, spreading like liquid gold through his chest. A quiet confidence began to settle in his heart, and the doubts that had followed him for so long began to dissipate, like fog being burned away by the first rays of morning sunlight. He had walked this far, through the forest and through his own fears, and now, standing at the heart of this mysterious ancient space, he felt a new sense of belonging. The whispering voice returned, though this time it was not as urgent or commanding. Instead, it spoke in a tone that was soothing, almost like a comforting lullaby. "You have come far," it murmured, "but the journey does not end here. You have unlocked the first door. Now you must open the second." The words lingered in the air, weaving through his thoughts, and the clarity he had felt moments ago deepened. He understood now. This journey was not just about following a path, but about unlocking parts of himself that had been hidden for far too long. The lantern, the path, and the whispering voice were not external forces, but manifestations of his own inner growth, guiding him to the next stage of his life. As he stood there, a new sensation rippled through him, a presence behind him. He turned slowly, his heart beating with a mixture of anticipation and peaceful resolve. In the distance, just past the trees, he could see a faint glow, the second light coming from the heart of the forest, where the trees grew even taller, their branches more intertwined, forming a canopy so thick that only the most determined light could pierce through. Without hesitation, the protagonist felt an almost magnetic pull toward the second light. It was subtle, yet undeniably real. The forest seemed to part for him as he began walking toward the glow, the path now clear before him, each step effortless, as though the earth itself were supporting him. As he walked deeper into the forest, the light from the lantern seemed to dim, yet it was no longer needed. The path ahead was now illuminated by the second glow, growing stronger with each step. It was soft, but filled with an almost tangible warmth, not unlike the light within him that had been kindled by his earlier journey. He was no longer just walking. He was transforming, becoming part of the very world around him, blending into the essence of this magical space. The light within you will guide you, the voice whispered once again. Trust it and you will find your way. The protagonist's gaze softened as he moved forward. The journey was not just about uncovering the mysteries of the forest. It was about uncovering the mysteries within himself. And with every step, he felt a little lighter, a little more at peace. The trees whispered their ancient wisdom, the wind caressed his skin, and the glowing light ahead promised a future filled with hope and possibilities. The second glow grew brighter still, and in the distance, the protagonist saw that it was not just a light, it was a gateway, an arch formed by the intertwining branches of two ancient trees. The path led toward it, a path of light, and he knew without a doubt that crossing through that arch would bring him closer to understanding, to the next phase of his journey. As he approached the arch, a soft breeze blew through the trees, sending a cascade of leaves swirling around him. It was as if the forest itself was welcoming him, wrapping him in its embrace. He felt calm, centered, as though this moment, this place, was where he had always belonged. With a final glance back at the stone altar and the lantern now dimming behind him, he stepped toward the arch, the light drawing him forward. This time, he was no longer hesitant. He had already crossed so many thresholds, both physical and emotional, that he knew what awaited him ahead was not a mystery, but a promise of growth. As he stepped beneath the arch, the world around him seemed to shift, the air becoming denser, the light from the trees taking on an ethereal quality. The forest, though unchanged, felt somehow different, as though he had entered a place where the rules of time and space did not apply. It was alive in ways he had never imagined, filled with possibilities, both real and imagined. And in that moment, he understood. This journey was not just about the path he walked, nor the light he followed. It was about embracing the unknown within. The true journey was not about the destination. It was about how far he was willing to go to find himself. As the protagonist stepped through the arch, a wave of energy rippled through him. The air shifted, the warmth of the forest around him felt deeper now, almost tangible, like a soft embrace welcoming him into something greater. The light from the trees above shimmered and swirled, casting delicate patterns on the ground, creating an almost dreamlike quality to the space. The trees in this new area stood even taller than before, their trunks twisted in magnificent spirals that reached high into the sky. The colors here were softer, the shades of green deepening into rich emeralds, while the golden light that filtered through the canopy made the ground beneath seem alive, as though it were breathing with the forest. Every step he took brought him deeper into a world where time seemed to stand still, but where everything around him felt deeply, intimately alive. There were no more paths, no more signs to follow, only the natural flow of the world around him. The air was so thick with life, it felt almost vibrant. He could hear the gentle rustling of the leaves, the quiet crunch of grass beneath his feet, and the occasional distant bird call that added to the symphony of the night. The forest felt endless, and yet every part of it seemed so carefully designed, as though each element had a purpose, a piece of a puzzle. He was only just beginning to understand. The pathway ahead grew dimmer, the lantern's light softer now, as if it was being absorbed into the very air, merging with the world around him. For a moment, the protagonist felt a soft pull in his chest, a sense of urgency, but also a deep peace. The forest, it seemed, was urging him forward, whispering invitations in its silent language. Asterisk, his gaze was drawn to the center of this part of the forest, where a small clearing revealed a pool of still water, reflecting the light in a soft, magical glow. There was something so calming about the water, its surface smooth and undisturbed, as if time itself had chosen to rest in this moment. He approached slowly, his steps quiet and deliberate, unsure of what exactly he was meant to do next. But there was no fear now, only an overwhelming sense of peace that washed over him, filling him with comfort. He crouched down by the edge of the water and gazed at the reflection before him. The lantern, now dimmed, cast soft shadows around the pool's edge, making the light flicker like an ancient memory. He saw his own face in the water, but there was something different about it. The man he had once been, uncertain and hesitant, seemed distant now, like a figure from a forgotten dream. The person he saw now was someone stronger, someone who had accepted the journey and embraced the change it had brought. His features seemed clearer, more defined, as if he were seeing himself for the first time. The voice spoke again, but this time it was not as an external force. It was within him, resonating through his soul. "This is the moment," it said softly. "Look into the water and understand. You have come not just to find your path, but to know the truth of who you are." As the words settled in, the protagonist gazed into the water once more. It wasn't just a reflection of his physical form. It was a reflection of everything he had come to understand about himself, the light and darkness, the fears and strengths, the past and the present. He saw a person who had once been lost, but had now found himself in a place of profound clarity. The first time he fully understood, The journey was never about escaping. It had always been about embracing the truth of who he was and the world around him. He was not meant to run away, but to stand tall and face whatever lay ahead with open eyes. The water's surface began to ripple slightly, the once still image now distorted, as though the forest itself was breathing with him. He stood up, his heart swelling with understanding. It was time. Time to move forward, Dot, with a final glance. At the still pool, he turned toward the path that lay beyond, no longer uncertain. The lantern's soft glow flickered back to life, shining once more as he walked deeper into the heart of the forest, where he felt a new sense of peace. He had crossed a threshold, but now his journey had truly just begun. Dot, as the protagonist, moved deeper into the heart of the forest. The air began to shift once again. The warmth of the lantern's glow had settled into something more profound, less tangible, but all-encompassing. It was as though the light had become part of the very fabric of the forest, intertwining with the earth, the trees, and the cool breeze that now felt like a comforting touch against his skin. The path before him was no longer just a trail, but a journey. And with each step, he felt the pull of something, or something that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. The stillness of the night no longer felt empty. It was alive, as if the forest itself was breathing with him. The trees stretched even higher now, their branches arching toward one another to form an intricate canopy above. The light from the lantern did not just illuminate the path. It reflected off the leaves above, casting soft patterns of shadow and light on the ground below. The forest was now a tapestry, each piece perfectly woven into the next, creating a sense of unity that seemed both surreal and deeply grounding. Dot, as he walked, his mind wandered back to the moment when he had first found the lantern, to the quiet whisper that had drawn him to this very place. Follow the light, the voice had told him. And now the light was no longer just a guide. It had become his companion, his connection to the world around him, and the path he had to take was changing him. The deeper he went, the more he felt himself shifting with it. Each step seemed to fill him with a new sense of purpose, as though he were shedding the weight of his past with every movement. He no longer felt the uncertainty that had plagued him at the start of his journey. Instead, there was a growing understanding, a calm knowing that he was exactly where he needed to be. Ahead, the path began to widen, and he saw that the forest opened into a large clearing. At the center of the clearing was a stone circle, ancient and weathered by time, its stones arranged in a perfect circle. The stones were etched with strange, intricate symbols, their meanings unknown but ancient, and they seemed to pulse with a gentle energy, as though they were alive in their own right. The lantern's light flickered again, brighter now, as though it recognized the significance of the place ahead. The voice spoke again, this time clearer, more confident. This is the doorway. Step through and you will see. He paused at the edge of the clearing, looking at the stones, feeling an irresistible pull toward them. He knew this was not just another physical step. It was a threshold, the final moment before he would cross into something far deeper than anything he had Yet experience stopped the stones, and the circle seemed to hum with life, their ancient energy beckoning him forward. He stepped closer, his heart beating steadily now, not with fear, but with a quiet certainty that this was his next step. Thought as he reached the stones, he felt a sudden rush of wind, soft but persistent, brushing against his face. It felt like the breath of the world itself, urging him onward. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the air deeply. It was as if the entire universe were aligned, waiting for him to take the next step. He placed the lantern down in the center of the stone circle, the light seeming to blend with the energy of the stones. The moment the lantern touched the ground, the forest seemed to pause, holding its breath, and for the first time, he felt truly connected, not just to the path, but to everything around him. The trees, the ground, the air, the light, they all seemed to be part of him, as though the journey he had taken had led him back to himself. The voice spoke once more, but this time it was not from outside him. It was from within, echoing through the very core of his being. The light has always been with you, the voice said. You are the light, and the light is you. His eyes opened slowly, and the world around him seemed to shimmer. He had reached the heart of the journey, the place where inner and outer worlds met. He had come not just to find a path, but to find himself. The forest, the light, the stones, they were all reflections of the journey he had undertaken, of the journey still ahead. The moment felt eternal, timeless. And as he stood there, the weight of the lantern light warming his hands, he knew that he had unlocked something far greater than a simple destination. He had unlocked the door to his own truth, and now he was ready. The light from the lantern now bathed the stone circle in a gentle, almost ethereal glow. The energy from the ancient stones had connected with the lantern's light, creating an environment so tranquil and full of life that it felt as though the air itself were whispering secrets. The protagonist stood in the center of the circle, feeling a quiet, profound sense of alignment, as if every part of him had come together in this moment. As he looked up toward the towering trees, their branches stretched high above him, weaving together to form a ceiling of green leaves and glowing light. He realized that he had crossed the threshold. It was not just a journey through the forest, but a journey of the spirit, one that had taken him deep into his own soul. The trees, the wind, the ground beneath him, they were no longer separate from him. They were part of him, and he was a part of them. For the first time, he understood the true nature of his journey. It wasn't about the destination, it never had been. The journey was about the unfolding of his inner light, a light that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. The lantern had not given him light. It had simply helped him realize that he had always been the light he was seeking. He closed his eyes for a moment, the stillness around him deepening as if the entire world were holding its breath. The soft rustling of the leaves became a song, a melody that seemed to carry his very essence into the universe. The voice spoke again, but this time it was not external. It was his own voice reverberating in his mind. The light within you is the light of the world. It is infinite. It is eternal. The words settled within him like a deep truth, filling him with a profound sense of peace. You are the keeper of this light. The path you have walked has always been within you, and now it is time for you to shine. Asterisk, the weight of those words stirred something deep inside. He opened his eyes and looked at the stone circle before him. There was no longer any mystery, no more doubt. The light he had sought, the external guidance he had followed, had always come from within. His soul had always known the way, even when his mind had doubted it. He lifted the lantern once more, its light now dimming slightly, but still glowing brightly, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. With reverence, he held the lantern high, letting the light radiate through the clearing. It wasn't just the light of the lantern anymore, it was the light of his own spirit. The light that had been hidden within him all along. As the light spread through the clearing, something incredible happened. The trees, the ground, and the very air around him seemed to respond to the light. The leaves glistened brighter, the air became warmer, and the world around him came alive. The forest was no longer just a collection of trees and plants. It was a living being, breathing and thriving with the light he had unleashed. Asterisk, a sense of profound connection filled him, and for the first time, he realized the full extent of what had occurred. The journey was not just about following a path, it was about awakening to the truth that had always been within him. The light, the forest, the air, they were all part of a greater whole. He was not separate from the world around him. He was integrated into it. The trees around him began to sway more energetically, their branches reaching out as if welcoming the light. It felt as though the world itself was celebrating his realization. He was no longer a stranger in this world. He was a part of it, deeply intertwined with everything that surrounded him. The voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't necessary. He no longer needed external guidance because he had found the light within himself. He was his own guide now, and he understood that the world was not a place to be feared or sought after. It was a place to embrace. He stood in the center of the clearing, his chest swelling with a quiet, steady confidence. The journey was not over, but it had changed. He was no longer seeking the unknown, but rather embracing it as part of his own being. The light was not just a guide, it was the path itself, and he had become the path. And with that understanding, he felt himself merge with the forest, the light, and the universe. He had stepped into his true self, and now he was ready for whatever came next. Forest around him began to hum with life, the branches of the trees swaying as though they were dancing to a rhythm only they could hear. The once still air now felt alive, filled with vibrations that echoed through the clearing. It was as though the entire world was waking up, breathing along with him. The glow of the lantern was no longer just a physical light, it had become a part of the world, merging with the earth, the trees, and the sky. He took a deep breath, his chest swelling with peace and purpose. His footsteps no longer felt heavy, but light and free. As he moved through the clearing, he felt as if he were floating, as though gravity itself had released its hold on him. The air around him was infused with the scent of blooming flowers. and the earth beneath his feet was soft, as if it too were part of the living fabric that surrounded him. The voice had stopped speaking. There were no more cryptic messages, no more demands to follow or instructions to heed. The silence was now filled with the whispers of the wind through the trees and the steady rhythm of his heart. In this silence, he realized that the journey he had embarked on had led him to a place where he no longer needed guidance. He had found himself, and in that discovery, he had found the path forward. He walked deeper into the forest, the light of the lantern still flickering gently in his hand, but now it felt like a mere extension of his being. It was no longer just an object to carry. It was part of him, integrated into his soul. The path ahead seemed clearer now, though the forest itself had not changed. It was he who had changed. His perception had shifted, and he now saw the world with new eyes, understanding that everything around him was not separate but connected, an intricate web of life, each part interwoven with the others in a cosmic dance dot. As he walked, he could feel the presence of the trees, the plants, the animals. Everything in the forest seemed to be watching him with a quiet awareness, as if they recognized the change. Within him, he felt a deep bond with this place, and for the first time, he understood that he was not just a visitor in the forest. He was a part of it, just as it was a part of him. The path wound through dense underbrush, but there was no fear. Now, he moved through it with ease, the light from the lantern casting soft shadows on the ground, the patterns of light dancing along with his movements. Every step he took was now an affirmation of the trust he had placed in himself. The doubts and hesitations that had once plagued him were long gone, replaced by a sense of clarity and peace. Ahead, the path opened up to a wide meadow, bathed in soft light. In the center of the meadow was a large stone, smooth and polished, as though it had been placed there by unseen hands. It stood alone in the middle of the field, an ancient symbol of the journey that had brought him here. He approached the stone, his heart beating softly in his chest. The closer he got, the more he felt the energy of the place, as if the stone itself were alive with the history of the land, holding secrets that had been passed down through time. He knelt before the stone, placing the lantern down beside him. The light flickered, casting soft shadows across the stone surface. For a moment, he simply sat there, breathing in the stillness, feeling the connection between himself and the world around him. The forest, the stone, the light, they were all one, and he was part of it. He placed his hand on the stone, feeling its smooth surface beneath his fingers. It was warm, as though it had been waiting for him to touch it, to unlock the final piece of his journey. As his hand rested on the stone, a soft pulse of energy flowed through him, and for a brief moment, he could see flashes of images, visions of his life, of the journey he had taken, of the people he had loved and lost. The images were fleeting, but they held a profound significance, reminding him that his path had always been intertwined with those who had walked beside him. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes, letting the energy of the stone flow through him. This was not just a physical journey, it was a spiritual awakening, a realization that his path had always been leading him toward this moment. He had found his place in the world, not as an individual, but as part of the greater whole. And with this realization, he understood that the journey was far from over. The light from the lantern, now dimming but still glowing softly, felt like a heartbeat in the quiet night. The path ahead was clear, and with it, a deep sense of purpose washed over him. He was ready to move forward, to embrace whatever came next, knowing that the journey had always been about self-discovery, about understanding who he truly was and what he was meant to be. The lantern's glow had now dimmed to a soft ember, yet its presence still felt strong, like the steady rhythm of a heart, pulsing with a quiet, constant light. The protagonist stood there, the stone beneath his hand still warm, the energy from the forest enveloping him. The journey had shifted. It was no longer about external discovery, but about embracing the path that lay within him. The landscape around him seemed to have changed as well. The towering trees, once distant and unfamiliar, now felt like old friends, standing tall and proud, their branches stretching toward the sky. Their leaves rustled gently in the breeze, whispering a language he couldn't fully understand, but somehow he knew the meaning of their song. The light of the lantern had melded with the forest, becoming one with the natural world. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the cool night air on his face, the soft rustling of leaves as they swayed with the wind. It felt as though the entire world was still, suspended in this one moment, as if time itself had paused to allow him to absorb everything he had learned so far. And in that stillness, he felt a deep sense of peace. He knew now that he wasn't just a traveler in this forest. He was a part of it, interconnected with everything around him. The journey was not just about moving forward. It was about deepening his understanding of himself, of the world, and of the interwoven threads of existence. His gaze turned toward the horizon, where the light of the lantern had faded, and in its place, a new, gentler glow was emerging. It wasn't the light from the lantern, but something that seemed to come from within the earth itself, glowing softly beneath the surface like the pulse of the world's heart. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a quiet beacon, calling him onward. The path was becoming clearer. The trees parted ahead, revealing a narrow trail leading deeper into the heart of the forest. He could feel the weight of the next step on his heart, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt right, as though the journey he had been on had prepared him for this exact moment. Trust yourself, the voice spoke once more, now clearer than ever. The light within you will lead you home. It wasn't a command. It was a reminder. He had always been his own guide, and the path ahead was his to choose. The light within him, the understanding, the wisdom had been the force that had driven him all along. He had learned to trust it, to listen to it, and now it was time to act on it. His feet began to move, carrying him along the path that lay ahead. With each step, he felt more sure, more present. The forest, once mysterious and unknown, now felt like a familiar place, a place where he belonged. The light that had guided him so far was now part of him, lighting the way forward. The trees around him seemed to reach out, almost as if they were blessing his journey. Their leaves shimmered in the soft moonlight, casting flickering shadows that danced along the ground. The path ahead was no longer unclear. It was inviting, welcoming him into a deeper understanding of the world and himself as he walked. He found himself reflecting on the path he had taken, the struggles, the fears, the doubts, and how they had all led him to this moment. Every twist, every turn had brought him closer to the truth that had always been within him. The light was not something external. It was his light, born from his experiences, his choices. His growth with each step, the forest seemed to open up even more, revealing new wonders and possibilities. The trees, the earth, the air, they all seemed to be waiting for him, welcoming him home. And in that moment, the protagonist realized that this journey was not about an end, it was about the beginning. The path ahead was infinite, filled with endless potential and opportunity. It was the beginning of a new chapter in his life, a chapter where he would no longer be guided by external forces, but by the light within himself. He had come this far, and now, with the path before him unfolding in front of him, he knew that he was ready to embrace the unknown, ready to face whatever came next, and ready to live fully in the light he had discovered within. The light from the lantern now pulsed softly in his hands, not just a guide, but a steady reminder of the journey that had shaped him, of the path that had led him to this moment. The light was no longer just a flicker in the dark. It had become a part of him, a reflection of his own soul. It was no longer something to follow, but something to embrace. As he continued walking, the forest seemed to expand in all directions, as though it were boundless, stretching infinitely outward. The trees no longer appeared to be rooted to the ground. They seemed to sway in the air, their branches reaching toward the sky, inviting him forward, as if the entire forest was breathing with him. The very air felt alive, filled with energy, warmth, and connection. Everything around him, every blade of grass, every rustling leaf, seemed to hum with vibrant potential. He didn't need to search for the way ahead. The path revealed itself to him in each step, as though the earth itself was guiding him. There was no confusion, no fear. The journey had led him to a place of inner clarity. With every step, he grew stronger, more aligned with his true self. The world around him no longer seemed vast and overwhelming. Instead, it was welcoming, like an old friend who had been waiting for him to arrive. The voice that had once guided him no longer spoke. It wasn't needed anymore. The guidance now came from within, a quiet understanding that resonated in his heart. He had become the very force that had driven him forward, the light he had been seeking. Ahead of him, the forest continued to open up. The light grew brighter, not from the lantern, but from within the very air, the trees, the ground beneath him. He felt as if he were walking through a dream where all things were possible, where the limitations of the world no longer applied. The very fabric of reality seemed to stretch and bend with his thoughts. He stopped for a moment to look around. The path had led him here, to this moment where the world was alive with potential and promise. The trees, the leaves, the wind, They were all part of him now, just as he was part of them. The boundaries between the world and his soul had faded, leaving only a singular connection. He was no longer an outsider in this place. He was a participant, a creator of his own reality. For the first time, he realized that the path ahead was infinite. There was no final destination, no end to the journey. The journey was the destination. It was about growth, about evolution, and about embracing the light within himself. It was about understanding that everything was interconnected and that he was a vital part of this vast, beautiful web of life. The protagonist smiled softly, knowing that his journey was far from over. It would never truly end. There would always be new paths to explore, new depths of himself to discover. The lantern's light was a steady companion, but it was no longer the only source of illumination. The true light, the light he had always sought, had always been inside him, waiting to be realized. With a sense of gratitude and peace, he walked forward into the infinite journey that lay ahead. The path was open, the world was waiting, and he was ready. He didn't need to know where it would lead. He knew that the journey itself was the gift, and that every step forward was a step deeper into his own true nature.